Welcome back to Highway Through Health. We're not a crisis line, we're not a therapy show, and we're not licensed healthcare providers. What we are is a place where lived experience is taken seriously because too many people have discovered the more clearly they speak, the worse they're treated. We share personal experience not to give medical advice, but so that when people encounter the kinds of situations we discuss, they're ready to recognize patterns and respond effectively. This show is about language, power, and what happens when systems stop listening and start translating people into problems. If you've ever felt misheard, mislabeled, or punished for staying coherent under pressure, you're in the right place. Hello, good afternoon to you, Vivian. How are
Hey,
you doing?
all right. How are you?
Good. We have an intense show today, don't we? We got a lot to talk about. I like your headband. I like your bandana, I
Thank
mean.
you. Yeah,
Oh,
doing my road look today.
all right. Let me get myself straightened out here. All right, here we go. Episode 4. Can you believe we've been doing this? This is our fourth episode already.
God, it really is something, and I hope we're reaching a lot of people, and I think we'll reach many more.
I hope so. We'll find out. Well, at least we're going to give them some lessons. And lesson 4 today is a pretty intense one. This is one of the ones where it's easy to get tripped up on. So we'll try and do the best we can to sort this one out. And what this episode's about is how the lupus wasn't necessary, but the alignment was. And probably what we want to really say is we're not doing this to glorify suffering. We're not saying suffering is the only path to having these kinds of experiences. We're not saying we encourage people to suffer. We don't want people to suffer. We're bending over
Exactly.
backwards so that you don't have to go through what we went through. So for us, the lupus wasn't necessary, the kidnapping wasn't necessary, all the coercive measures that were used were not necessary. What was necessary for us, though, was really the dissolution of what's known as double-mindedness. And, after that experience was over, I just walked into it and it happened and it was spectacular. And I thought, you know what, now it makes sense to me that what the church was a place where somebody who grew up in a functional church slash community, ecclesia, as it's sometimes called, would expect to have an experience like that at a fairly young age. When I look at the Bible and I look at what's going on, you think, okay, this was at one point a normal kind of experience, and it took the suffering to highlight that for us. I would say right now that if I had not have had that experience, I have no idea how I would have dealt with the 18, 19 years of affliction that I've gone through. I mean, that's how valuable that experience was. So having it, um, stigmatized didn't help me, and I'm sure it didn't help you either. So we went through that.
No, not at all. And it goes to what you had said, yeah, I think, the lupus and having all the physical pain, the not being able to walk, the nerve damage, all that. When you think about how life is a series of challenges, and we would be challenged in multiple ways in order to learn lessons. That's part of what God has created for each of us is these series of challenges. And as you meet them, as you surpass them, as you meet them as Jesus did, it does allow for that where you get to a place of moving past it to where you can get to where we have been, where we're at a peace beyond all understanding.
Right.
um, and it really, I have to say, if I hadn't been dealing with lupus all those years, and true enough, if I hadn't already dealt with a significant amount of trauma and certain kinds of abuses and things that I had to really be, dissociate, and if I didn't have autism that allowed me to see patterns and to approach life in a much different way than most people, I don't know that I would have had the survival skills to adequately maintain a perspective and the ability to come back and put things into a way that I can, along with you, translate this for other people.
Right.
I don't, it's a way of looking at things in a perspective that, you know what, the challenges I had and the things, where I met and exceeded what God would have wanted me to do, at least, hope so.
Mhm.
To get from point A to point B, it brings a particular amount of wisdom with it too. So it's not just the piece of that in facing down what I would consider people behaving in a way that was definitely amoral, and I would certainly
Right.
say falling into a satanic mindset, of sheerly intentionally causing abuse, intentionally causing trauma to
Mhm.
so-called research it. Um, this is something that, being able to face that down and come out the other side of that fire and say, God had my back the whole time and I'm not afraid of you. And
Right.
that really takes them down several pegs because they don't like the fact that they no longer hold a power they never should have attempted to take away. Nobody should ever try and wrest somebody's uh, civil, human, and constitutional rights away from them, particularly not under false and perjurious pretenses, which is what we went through.
Exactly.
But the fact that we've been able to do that and have taken back control of our lives, have had such deep spiritual experiences, um, that matters because in being able to tell, it's like you said, we don't want other people to have to suffer. We want to be able to be the ones who explain things in a way that people can have that control over their own lives, have that relationship with God, and build it in a way that nobody else will have to challenge them in the horrific ways that we have been.
Exactly. I think for some people that may be listening that you know, the biblical concept of carrying 5 years, 5 generations of trauma, I think it's more than that. When
Yeah,
you look at the amount of suffering that went through that 7.5 years just to get ready to have that experience in the first place. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about very deep cleaning out. We're talking about how, we were forced to do it by disease, but after we really understood what it was that we're actually doing, then suddenly we're doing it because we want to do it, because we know the value of it and the positive effects that it has on our lives. So that's what we're trying to unpack for the listeners. We're also somewhat selfishly talking about doing it for ourselves because we have, as Dana said, we've been harassed, psychiatrically harassed by using the kind of language that we have to use to describe these kinds of adventures, if you want to call them that.
right.
So, um, moving on then. So we're not trying to build out a martyr narrative. That's not what we're doing.
No, not at all.
We
Not
want
at
to teach
all.
people.
That was not fun.
No, no. We're not glorifying collapse. We don't like it. We're not sitting there looking at people in a bad situation going, "Oh, you're growing now, aren't you?" That's an
Uh,
I've had people do that, and that's not what we're looking at either. That's not what we're doing. So we're going to talk about alignment, how alignment can be practiced without the suffering. But when we're talking about alignment, we're talking about a pretty intense exorcism of
yes.
multiple levels of trauma and multiple levels of things that most of us are carrying around in our DNA. So when we talk about this double-mindedness thing, we're not being mystical. What we're really talking about is an internal contradiction that goes away as you deal with the suffering. I think, as we said last week, that real intensive amount of authenticity is what keeps fear and shame from grabbing a foothold in your consciousness. And when you've wiped everything out, suddenly you find out, wait a minute, I can get rid of that everywhere, not just in some
Right.
places. So,
Yeah.
and so when you get into double-mindedness, what is it? Well, it's kind of like saying one thing but meaning another. Um, we say things and don't do things. We say things here which probably hurt our image, but in our lives and our experiences are completely factual. We have to use language that's not common, and we don't want to do that, but that's the way the system is right now. And if we don't do it, then we're vulnerable to more kidnappings and more assaults and things of that nature. So
And we
when
don't want to
we're,
see anybody else go through it either. So by being able to establish that yes, these things are real, we're very solid, practical minded people who are very down to earth and not you know, off center or anything. We're in fact very, very centered.
hmm
Um, and it is a matter of being able to speak up about this so that other people can then feel comfortable with their own experiences because I'm quite certain that we are but two of many.
yes,
And not everybody has had the opportunity um, to find a place to speak up and out about this. I know when I was first starting to go through a lot of things, unfortunately, I had to turn to help from people who were trafficking me.
hmm
And I didn't realize that at the time. I knew something wasn't right. Um, I didn't realize just how deeply wrong it was. Now I realize why God had put me in that position. So I'm very grateful for that. But of course, I don't want anyone else to continue to go through it. And I know that what I had reported back in Baltimore and Maryland was quite significant. And I say thank you, God, for allowing me that.
hmm
Having said that, yeah, we are very I know I was looking for some way of being able to find language and to find somebody else to commiserate with about this because I thought this is just very odd. This is mind blowing to me. It really, I could really feel, again, not just the certainty of God's presence, just that knowing and knowing that now I understand that people were intentionally putting me through several death experiences
hmm
and the monetary reasons why they were doing it. And that is very heartbreaking and devastating to me. But however, having said that, it has allowed me to have an opportunity to expose a trafficking and profiteering ring, an
right,
insurance fraud, Medicare and Medicaid fraud ring, um, and a number of other things, as well as giving me that deep sense of satisfaction and understanding about where the scientific meets the spiritual and to be able to put certain things that used to be very common knowledge and from a spiritual and scientific standpoint and kind of what you had mentioned too about how these experiences were actually things that were expected once upon a time. So
hmm
to be able to kind of bring that back into common parlance and for people to have a better understanding of this as opposed to these frauds and these terrible people who are trying to suppress it with neurotoxic poisons um and it's necessary and with the hopes that more people as they have these spiritual experiences, as they have these awakenings, as they feel this energy, as they are touched by the hand of God in many different forms, are going to be able to understand it and put it into put their own situation in language and then put that into use moving forward in their lives and
yeah,
because it really gives you a much bigger perspective and other opportunities for things that it's like you only saw a narrow slice of something prior and now you see the entire spectrum, or you only saw one color of the rainbow, now you see the whole thing.
hmm Yeah, and so I think the best way I can describe this anyway, and that's one of the reasons why I asked you if you wanted to do this show because we don't have a place for this to develop this language. We don't have a vocabulary. The experiences are beyond anything that can be described with the typical vocabulary. I learned why Jews don't say God's name, because it's
Yes,
that
exactly.
spectacular. It is absolutely that, and you can't put a word to it, and okay, that was part of their tradition at one point. So when I look at what happened, it was a wiping out of the double-mindedness, and probably anybody that works in a corporate environment, anybody that works anywhere knows what we talk about double-mindedness. It's making those kind of trade-offs that you really don't want to make. You know, if you're claiming truth while you're managing your image, or if you're wanting transcendence, but you don't want to pay the emotional price that it takes to get there, or if you're demanding security while claiming faith, you know, all that
Right.
stuff is kind of a double-minded approach. It doesn't work. And what happened for us was that got wiped out because the collapse itself accelerates the kind of alignment that we're talking about that starts to get us into the vocabulary that helps get people to understand what's waiting for them at the end of that rainbow that you mentioned. It's just an absolutely spectacular experience. And so the extreme illness strips bargaining, right? We don't have anything
Yeah.
to bargain with. The bargaining
Right.
thing is gone. We're not looking for trade-offs. The disease strips away future fantasy. It strips away comfort. It strips away reputation management and just about every illusion of control that you ever had. And the minute that bargaining disappears, that's when the alignment starts.
Yeah.
Not quite
Yeah.
rock bottom, but it's you're not negotiating with your double-mindedness. You're starting to lay back, you're starting to, you know, gateway into nothing but truth kind of a mentality. So,
Yeah, you understand what it means to completely give yourself up to faith and to completely give yourself up to God, because at a point you realize it's like, okay, I've done every conceivable thing that I can do. I have to kiss this up to God. I have to leave it in God's hands. And really, I think unless you are at that point and that place between disease and circumstance and things, just you just have to genuinely let so much go. You
right.
realize how we have only a certain amount of control, and then beyond that, it really is God's plan and not man's.
And when we're talking about that, we're not talking about surrendering to victimhood. Well, that's actually quite the
No.
opposite. This is what we're trying to describe here is how the truth literally sets a person free as we experienced it through disease activity. And it was really what we're chalking up to the collapse and how it gets things going. We don't want you to do that. So what we're trying to
Right.
get to is wiping all that out, as we've said a lot. So hang on, sorry, get my notes.
Sure.
So if we're going to replicate this, we're saying that something about this must be a principle. It's got to be because the commonality is there. It's happened to me. It's happened to you. It's happened to a number of other people we've spoken with. When you
Yeah.
get out of the stigma area, then you can start to have conversations with people about this topic. However, it still remains so stigmatized. It's really, really, really hard to get a conversation going without people looking at you and wondering what's going to happen to you next.
Yeah. That's why I'm hoping that by being able to normalize this and to hope to build another vocabulary around it, to make it make sense to people no matter where they come from on any perspective regarding any type of faith or what kind of faith we're talking about. You can just put it as a faith in energy because God is energy, and it's like trying to conceptualize infinity.
Hmm.
And that really is what that is about. We're all eternal energy, and we temporarily inhabit these bodies. And I think sometimes to help people kind of wrap their heads around that concept a little bit, and to realize that we're more than just these what physically makes us up. To realize that we have an energy body, or as they call it, a light body, and I think the more people kind of are able to wrap their heads around those concepts, it may make it a little easier for them to kind of understand and even understand what's within the Bible, and then understand some of the things that were purposely cut out,
Hmm.
that allow for that deeper one-on-one relationship with God, because you've had too many people trying to prophetize and commoditize the human experience, and that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
And if we can help give people back that knowledge and that language and a place to kind of discuss this, um, and discuss these events in a way that helps them make it make sense for them, for each individual, and give them an idea of how to then move forward with that, because that can be a bit much to try and wrap your head around too after that's happened, that you have so many more possibilities, that your sight is a lot more, your perspective is so much more open, and you have a lot more of that wisdom that's on a very deep level,
Hmm.
and how to be able to best move forward with that in a way that, um, helps it make sense, not just to the person who experiences it, but to other people. You find a
Yeah.
purpose. You find your life's purpose.
Right.
I yeah, that's legit.
And if you think it's easy, try doing this if you've never done it or had any exposure to this. Just radical honesty. It doesn't matter if you're in a corporate environment or what. Absolutely no strategic lying, no image management. There's no performative spirituality. Decisions are made as if reputation doesn't matter, and all the alignment happens. If alignment doesn't happen, comfort doesn't show up. And I think removing outcome attachment was a big thing. I mean, we didn't,
Yes.
when I first got into the disease issue, one of the things that we first heard about fear was future events appearing real. And that's
Yeah.
really kind of a good acronym for what it stands for, because then you start thinking, okay, I can't sit around and think about this awful death I'm going to be dying. I got to think about what I'm doing right now at this moment. I planned when I worked on the farm, you have to plan spring, summer, fall. What are you going to do? Winter. It's not like I sit around doing nothing or playing victim. I'm always putting energy forward into something, but
Yes.
I just don't have I just don't get a lot of outcome thoughts about what's going to happen for this,
Yeah.
even with what we're doing here to develop the language. We're developing language. We're doing this today. We think it's a good thing, and we'll just keep going with it. So,
Yeah, that's also something that, is brought up in Buddhist philosophy a lot too, to not be
mm,
attached to the outcome. You do something for the love of doing it. You do something for the love of creation. You do something for the love of bringing something positive, into the world, and in that way, that's how we are co-creators with God. And it really isn't about
mm,
what the outcome is. It's about that creation itself, and then after that, you just have to trust that what you put out there is going to be seen, heard, felt by the people who need it.
right. And
Yeah.
so we hope that's happening. And so and what we're talking about is voluntary. We're talking about a voluntary compression. So what we're saying is if you want to replicate what happened to us and what we've been through, then you have to kind of allow yourself to be compressed in a
Yeah.
way and go through a mini collapse, not a complete collapse, but what you do is find an area that you want to get rid of in your life and collapse that. And then you rebuild around absolute radical honesty and authenticity. And you'll start feeling these feelings that we're talking about. Then you
Yeah.
start realizing, wait a minute, I can start using these in my life. These are experiential things that you're doing. We're not talking about dogma. We're talking about principles. There's
Right.
something to this
100%.
that's effective that we don't have the answers for, and we want dialogue, not abuse, when it comes to this topic.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. It's about allowing that, and if you're somebody who, and I know this is a big issue among neurodivergent people and neurotypical people, when you've had when you've had trauma, when you do have overwhelm, as opposed to reaching for a substance, as opposed to reaching for something to dull that down and that holds that in, it's about learning how to let it go. It's about learning how to express it in a way that's positive. It's about not blocking that energy. It's about letting it go, about letting yourself be lighter, about letting yourself become lighter. And to let go of that hurt. It's not that you leave the lesson behind. It's that you leave the emotion and the negativity connected with the lesson that's learned. You can take the lesson and leave the rest of it go. And
hmm
when you're not blocking that, when you are allowing your own, evolution, um it matters, and it matters in a big way. And I think we've seen a lot of, unfortunately, I mean, that's what the psych industry does. They want to, poison people with neurotoxic drugs that don't allow for growth, that don't allow for uh, spiritual movement. It doesn't allow for any kind of emotional movement. They really want to have people hold on to the trauma, and
Mhm.
that's not healthy in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
No.
And what we're discussing is about how do you let it go to transform, much like the butterfly comes out of the cocoon and needs that painful experience of moving out of the cocoon to strengthen their wings for flight. It is the same thing. It's the
Hmm.
exact same principle.
And as you get into this radical honesty, what you find is it starts to attack what's known as learned helplessness. And if you're new to this topic, it's something to study because it's very closely related to dead in sin when you start realizing you don't have to wait for your body to die to have a death experience.
Right.
So, and what this learned helplessness happens when an effort feels disconnected from an outcome. So, what we're not talking about and letting go of the outcome is not um, getting into learned helplessness. In other words, we don't see futility in what we're doing, but what it's doing is just, in its most powerful form, learned helplessness would be the fear of death, which is one of the reasons why the Bible says, overcome your fear of death if you want to get rid of your sins. And so, when mortality is dominating your perception, people start to bargain and distort and image manage. And that's exactly what you can't do because that distortion is exactly what corrupts the feedback loop. And you get that feedback loop corrupted, it starts adding chaos. So the more you get into the radical authenticity and honesty, what happens is you're going to start mapping things different. And the way you map input, output, effort, and results becomes completely different. So
Yeah.
what really comes back is agency. You're not bargaining, you're not compromising anymore, you're not giving in halfway anymore, you're not living up to half measures anymore. Now, now you got your agency back and it's an empowerment thing, which we're also trying to get across to people, which is very difficult to get across to
Yeah.
people. It's just this really is, this is the truth setting a person free. And we
Oh,
feel it through this disease activity. And then after we learned what it was, then we started practicing because we know what it was.
right. Yeah, it's about that radical honesty. It's about having actual values, not value, but
Hmm.
values, and that matters. It's about having that honesty with yourself, and about even learning how to check your own body and your own energy. Where are your sore spots? What is it that you can do to get rid of to then move into a more peaceful nature?
Hmm.
um, the things that maybe need to be unpacked from childhood, uh, from relationships. For some people, it may be, why am I repeating the same pattern of bad relationships? It's about learning. Okay, maybe this is what happened to me, and now I'm just used to this kind of treatment or used to somebody mistreating me. How can I now get rid of that? What lesson can I learn from that in order to facilitate me moving forward and go
Hmm.
and truly getting away from it, not just the people, but the attitude,
Right.
and how to change that sort of sense around oneself, the vibration around oneself, so that it's not attracting that anymore, nor are you going to allow it to be a part of your life. In other words, it's
Hmm.
about learning how not to play the victim, how to be bold enough and brave enough and confident enough in oneself, and with that faith to be able to stand up to people, that when you see this kind of harm, when you feel it, you can say, I'm
Right.
not comfortable with this. This is not okay with me. And to have that faith in being able to walk away and knowing it will be okay, because you're acting on your highest good. You have that reconnection and alignment with instinct, and that
Hmm.
reconnection with higher self and with God that allows you to be able to walk confidently through the world and to have God order your next steps, that you feel comfortable and confident enough that when you pray for guidance that you're receiving it and not being deceived by people who would falsely claim that power and take
Yeah.
it away for their own selfish ends.
And so through all this discernment building, which is really what we're doing, it is an input-output activity. What am I putting into this and what am I getting out of it? Because you know if you're wasting your effort into something that you're just getting lied to, you're getting rotten feedback, you're getting, things that are not healthy for you, your life, or your future, then you know that you don't feel emotionally obligated to stay in that. You punch out and you move on. So
Yes.
if you can't input what the radical honesty does is allow you to start learning how to input and evaluate these inputs and outputs better.
Yeah.
Because if you start distorting what happens, then you get into a point where if you misrepresent results, then you're corrupting your interests. You're corrupting your internal data. And then you start recognizing that corrupted pattern starts getting normalized. And then you start revolving around this corrupted pattern. And what we're talking about is breaking all of those, not some of them, all of them.
Right. And not people pleasing or making excuses for other people's bad behavior. It's time for those other people to carry their own damn baggage.
Yep, exactly.
Uh,
Don't
and
don't
and
hand your problem to me. I got
that's
enough.
it. That's exactly right. You know,
Yep,
you want to deal in bullshits, open a fertilizer factory. I'm not
right.
here for that. You know, this
Yep.
is, and at a point they have to learn how to carry it all for themselves.
Hmm.
And it's about not being passive and people pleasing anymore. No, you
Mm-mm.
either can respect me and respect my journey and celebrate the fact that I'm getting better, or you can play the part of an asshole and behave in ways that are unconscionable,
Right.
that definitely go against anything that's good and decent, and wanting somebody to get better and move on with their life. Because if you're not doing that, then you obviously have ulterior motives. You
Right.
really don't have good intentions for me or anybody who's in a situation like that. Clearly, the intentions are something else, and it's best to get away from that and learn where it is you are supposed to be, because whatever that situation was, you're already past the point of needing to leave.
Hmm. I agree. And
Yeah.
so what we're saying is you get this corrupt data out, you start to learn how to do this, input, output, your discernment is building, radical honesty leads, you're not managing your reputation. Now hopefully you can start hearing some of the things that are going to go away, some of the things that you don't obsess on, think about, or want to do with your life. None of that matters anymore. It all goes away. And so what happens is, as you'll notice that if you look back at say times you were deceptive, and some jobs require you to be deceptive. Let's be really honest with that. Marketing jobs are famous for that. Psychiatric jobs are famous for that. There's a number of jobs where people are expected to be dishonest. That's the political thing. And so that kind of mentality, you don't notice it. When a person's doing that all the time, you don't notice it. But when you stop doing it, then you start noticing it. And then you start realizing how much that faulty processing increased the chaos in your life and how that chaos increased your sense of helplessness. And the stuff we're talking about isn't mystical at this point, it's structural. Yeah, we mentioned spirituality, but this is structural spirituality that works.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and then you have people who are in the higher rankings of business and other certain things, the insurance industry, medical, certain other things where it becomes normalized in increments. And I mean, we've heard since the Oliver Stone film Wall Street about greed is good, but that's an actual
mhm,
attitude that those folks have had with these corrupt corporations, with these oligarchs and globalist Wall Street elites for a very long time. And it isn't new. I mean, it does go back to the Gilded Age and the
right.
Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan and all these folks who laid the foundation of the Wall Street elites. And their attitude is they're just looking at people like numbers on a ledger page, like dollar signs. And that does become very normalized for those folks.
It
It doesn't
does.
make it right, but it makes it an everyday thing for these folks. That's how those that run these so-called insurances have no problem denying life-saving procedures or other things for folks because that is their job to actually have more people get sick. So that has become a very normalized thing to put profits over people. Again, that's amoral. It totally doesn't make it right, but it makes it their every day. And at some point, I can only imagine that some of them are going to have a come to Jesus moment anyway.
Mhm.
And I'm
I,
sure it's occurred to more than a few.
I learned a pretty valuable notion when I was in the military. We were on a exercise at Shaw Air Force Base, and I was talking to a pilot. We were in a command center with all this Iran stuff going on. Where they had pictures on the wall of what bridges we were going to bomb and what bombs we were going to use on them. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff hanging up on this command center. And I'm talking to a pilot who was there, and he said, "You know what?" He talked about leadership from below. And I didn't understand what that was, but he said when he drives into the base every day, he's greeted by a gate guard. And if you're in the military, gate guards are kind of the people that a lot of people would tend to make fun of. They tend to be the lowest rung on the totem pole, but they're really not. He said this guy came through and his uniform was perfect. His salute was perfect. He was totally professional. And he said, you know what? I looked at myself and I thought that guy is more, has more military bearing than I do as a pilot. And so he says that leadership from below. And I think what we're doing with the healthcare industry in some ways is trying to lead them from below because the leadership within the healthcare industry really doesn't seem to be too interested in changing this kind of thing. Because when we're going through a reordering, if you've just died, literally had that whole rebirthing experience, all the stuff that you hear about, believe me, you're going to have, and especially if you don't know that that can happen to you before your body dies, then you're going to be going through some pretty major reordering. And as you're getting your vocabulary back together, you got to be around people who are being honest, brutally honest if necessary around you because when you're interjecting false signals into a person, if you're lying to a person that's having this intense spiritual experience, you are going to make their experience so much worse. You're going to increase their chaos. You're going to make much longer period of time before they can get their feet back on the ground and get reoriented and get back to what you would call normal again. But you have to
Yeah,
realize these reorderings are massive. They're just massive.
yeah, yeah. And I'd like to say, I know I said it before, but as always, thank you so much for your service.
Oh, you're
Very
welcome.
deeply appreciated. And I'll say too, where you mentioned about leading from the bottom. I mean, I was like that when I was in retail management. I mean, I started out like most people. I'd had a few different jobs, cashier, uh, but I worked my way up. And my thing was always, no matter what store I was managing or the type of store I was managing, it was my feeling was you're the folks that are dealing with the day to day and the face that the customer is seeing. I mean, I may be out there from time to time too, of course. But if you have a good suggestion or something that's going to work, tell me by all means, and I'll definitely
Hmm.
give you credit for it. And I never asked anybody to do anything that I didn't pick up and do myself. And I think that's just part of my philosophy in life, regardless.
Yeah.
But you have to realize that a lot of everything in life is a team effort. So sometimes too, even when in thinking about the different challenges and things that I've been through, it is a matter of spiritually now having a perspective like I can thank the people who brought me the challenges because it allowed me to grow in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Hmm.
Um, and that's where you say about forgiveness, now that I'm at a safe distance, provided they're not going to try any more shenanigans with me, to say the least. I can then just say at a distance, it's like I don't want to put any energy towards anybody. I kiss it up to God, but I can be grateful for the lessons I've learned. So a lot of this too is where it comes in that I wouldn't mind, to me, I want to be able to speak to people who are in charge of allocating healthcare funding. Because I do know that what I reported in Maryland is being very heavily investigated by both federal and state authorities. And I wanted to be known that, I am certainly not the fiction that was written. What happened to me was unconscionable with the misuse of regression hypnotherapy and past life regression hypnotherapy. I didn't appreciate being used as a guinea pig like that.
Right.
If somebody wanted to see if it worked, they could have done that in a way that was on the up and up with me. But clearly, they were more interested in learning how to weaponize something and making me look crazy for a number of different reasons, all of them having to do with dollar signs. And that's not okay. But like I say, I'm grateful that God gave me the wherewithal to report this because it is something serious that's been going on in the Baltimore area in particular, but Maryland in general for far too long. Um,
Right.
it
And
is
eventually we'll
really,
do an episode on this in particular, just how the whole stigmatization system works
yeah.
and how you get hauled in and just
Yeah, yeah, your
um
your civil rights are taken away without cause. And what I found out is one of the corporations that was tacitly doing a lot of this. They operate in other states, and these other states are ones in which people can be arrested without cause.
I'm
So it
not
makes it
surprised.
very, yeah, it makes it very. North Carolina happens to be one of them, by the way. Um, so, it
Yep.
is, it's these folks do look for loopholes in the law. Again, it's how Johnson and Johnson has gotten away with a lot of things, certainly with the talc, but they applied that then to risperidone and Invega, other products. They're
Once
just
you
not good people.
once you learn the system, you learn how to exploit it. So
Right.
what we're hoping to give some people is a little bit ways to defend yourself. So to kind of go back and recap this a little bit, what we're saying, the best as we understand it, what double-mindedness does is really creates this internal friction. And that internal friction ends up amplifying fear shame cycles. And it's really only until you introduce the radical honesty, and I say I have to renounce my freedom to lie. And that's really what reduces that friction and starts getting you back on that spiritual path and starts putting these emotions not into a sense of chaos. You don't feel them as chaos. You're able to order them and deal with them and work through whatever gets
Right.
thrown at you.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
It's a matter of I can't pretend myself anymore. I can't, and I definitely can't pretend to anybody else.
yep,
If this is how I feel, this is how I feel. If that makes you uncomfortable, then so be it. I'm not willing to compromise myself or my emotions or my own perspective anymore for somebody else's comfort or
right.
to line their pockets. I'm just not okay with that. And
No,
I think for me in many ways I wasn't ever anyway. Again, having the autism and a sort of disconnect with certain things, it life was already not comfortable. Well, why not allow it then to just allow me to be comfortable within my own sphere, and then other people are welcome to it. But that was one thing people always knew, if they say, well, can I get your honest opinion, and I'd say, well, are you sure you want it? Because I was going to give an honest opinion, and they
yeah,
knew that. So that was one thing that people did know to come to me, that I wasn't just going to tell them something that was going to mollify them.
right.
Like somebody
Yeah.
used to post on my wall a lot. It's like I'm not a bakery. Don't come to me for a sugar coating. And that's fairly true. I'm
Mhm.
tactful, but it's going to be an honest answer, and it's not that I'm looking to hurt anybody's feelings. It's just that somebody asking me a question, it may be a more complicated and complex answer, but I'm certainly not going to say something to somebody just to make them feel good.
No, I mean, we've
I just
spent
don't
time
work that
fighting
way.
for our lives. And when you're fighting for your life, and then you don't, there's a lot of little niceties that you tend to get rid of real fast. Because what we have to do with dealing with suffering on a 24/7 basis, we have to reduce that friction because we know when we do that, reduce the internal friction, it increases stability. Stability increases clarity. Clarity strengthens purpose. Purpose then metabolizes pain a whole lot more efficiently. And so there's nothing supernatural about what we're talking about. To
Right.
us, it's just life and how we deal with it and how it works. And it is unfortunately quite stigmatized because, some of the emotions that we get into can be extremely intense. And people, if you're not used to understanding what someone's going through in one of these reordering processes, it's very easy to misunderstand what's going on with them. And they're really
Yeah,
just trying to get their framework put back together. And you can help them construct that framework or you can help destroy it. And I think what I found with the industry, the way it's set up today, is they're structured to destroy that framework. They're not structured to help build it out. So,
right,
and that's another reason why we don't sit around and debate skeptics. That's not our job. We're here to to tell you what happened, and we'll tell
right,
the best we can, and we do that to help other people and also to defend ourselves from unwarranted attacks. If you have one of those situations go on where you do have some pretty powerful emotions going on, for me, it's just like leave me alone and let me process it, and I'll be fine.
right, right.
That's it.
Yeah,
Because I know what's going on now. The first time it happened to me, I had no idea that that could happen. And so when it hit something that massive hits you out of the blue, that's an even another layer of stuff that you have to process. So,
right.
you know, we our biology still exists, pain still exists. What we're saying is when we get rid of that internal contradiction, boy, does everything get so much easier. And
Oh yeah,
that's not a mystical thing. That works. So we know hard
yeah,
things are going to happen to us. We know we're not done. We're still alive. But
yeah,
this is what we do, and this is how we deal with it, and that's why we don't. I'm not. I'll have minor debates with people, but I'm really not going to sit around debate a skeptic about what happened to me on April 15th,
no,
2014. I'm not going to listen to. I don't have any obligation to help another person
right,
struggle through their issues with it. I mean, I've done the best I can
right.
to explain it, and I'm going to keep going on. And this kind of gets back to the same thing that, you know, we don't really argue with psych or other branches
No,
because, of religion, because, really, even other branches of religion may use the same words, but we feel like we're speaking completely different languages. It gets back to the
yeah,
vector notion of words and
yes.
what are they as a function of prayer. But anyway, we'll get to that another time too.
Yeah, I think it's a practicality, and I think a lot of people maybe don't even realize that it is as simple as where you put your energy as well.
Mhm.
Because I choose not to put it into anything negative or negatory. I acknowledge a lot of the really bad shit that happened to me. I'm not, I don't shy away from it.
Right,
I acknowledge it, but I don't dwell on it.
right.
I look at how, okay, I'm taking my lessons learned. Now I'm focused on the positive things. I'm putting my energy towards the positive. I'm looking at, how I can find the different framework for this from philosophical, cosmic, everything that's in the Bible. I now have such a clarity of understanding about the Bible and
Right.
how it's written, and not just from history. And then I was always somebody that had looked at a lot of historical events and things like that anyway, to figure out how that all lines up. What are the commonalities in these comparative religions? Um,
Hmm.
and so for me to have a much more deeper understanding in a broader sense about how that all ties together, and what this cosmic energy is, and sort of the makeup of the energy of the universe, and it can be put into practical terms, as I'm finding out, and a lot of the other things that I was sort of directed into reading, and even like I say, some of the unethical people that were researching me. The thing of it is, there is a practicality in that. I wish they wouldn't have been trying to weaponize that. I wish they had been honest and ethical. But even though they
Right.
weren't, I am. So now it's
Exactly.
for me to be able to put that framework together as I'm, building and rebuilding my life, and moving forward in a direction that I did, and had I not had these experiences, I wouldn't, they would hit differently if I didn't have them. Because
Really,
somebody
yes,
can talk about it from a philosophical standpoint, and that's great. But when you're actually able to speak to somebody who's had the experiences and walk through the fire themselves, it's a whole different kettle of fish.
it really
So to
is.
be able to yeah, now to be able to backtrack and read these same books and the different things, methodologies and things that were misused on me, I'm going to use them in a positive sense to give people the tools uh, to do this in a way that empowers them, that's self-empowering, that brings it back to the individual between and the relationship between that individual and God. You don't need a middleman. And hopefully it'll help
Absolutely.
people to protect themselves from these folks who are out there, who are predatory, who do come at folks with ill intent, and it is a very sad thing and a demonic thing that that's out there. But it is, and
It
again,
is.
hopefully the exposure that we're bringing to all this is going to help. Is going to shine a very bright light that will dissolve it.
Let's hope so. So for us,
Yeah,
the mature position on endurance would be more around the fact that endurance really isn't our goal. Alignment's our goal. Endurance was my goal before April 15th, 2014. That was, I've got to do this. I have to do it for a number of reasons. And but once that happened, now okay, now this is about alignment. This is endurance becomes a byproduct. We're not trying to say we're going to train you how to suffer. We're gonna, we're
right,
going to let you get
right.
around that.
No,
This is great.
no,
No, we would much rather not be suffering. I'm really getting tired of it. It's old. But when you realize the goal of that is to push alignment, to drive alignment, then the endurance starts coming automatically. You don't really have to struggle for it. It shows up and you're all right with it. So
yeah,
we're saying, try some of the stuff we're talking about. Of course, we're going to have more and more discussions about this topic as time goes on. So if it sounds a little confusing now, well, it was very confusing to us as well, especially
yeah,
after it first happened and you're trying to set your framework back up and learn how to talk without sounding silly and you
yeah,
putting it all in a logical way. That takes a while. So basically what we're saying is radical honesty being at the core is going to help you. It's going to dissolve those internal contradictions. It's really once that happens, start looking at yourself, observe what happens. Where's your fear go? To us, fear is not something that should even be bothering in your consciousness. Neither is shame. That should be gone too. If you're struggling with both of those, there's ways to get rid of those. Those are not genetic things that you're stuck with. You don't have a
right,
brain disease. There is no drug that's going to
right.
get rid of that. What is going to get rid
Exactly.
of that is putting energy in motion and in the way that kind of we're talking about that really, really starts driving that alignment process and you feel it internally and you're not crushed by external forces anymore.
Right. Right, you start to have different perspective and different expectations perhaps in life. And even if you came from a place of it being healthy before, it is really about realizing that you're not going to settle. Um, and settling for something is maybe not the way to go. You're going to have a lot of it just makes you realize that life is really very beautiful, and very the way it's put together is something that it's one thing to be told that, but when you deeply understand it, when you actually see it for yourself and can understand and appreciate um that even the challenges as you overcome them, the way that you end up being broken and then repaired is very beautiful. I've understood a lot of things that I wouldn't have expected. Um, and the fact that paying attention is always much more valuable than paying money. You realize just how much that matters, how much having, being able to share a genuine love and caring and concern and affection for other people. Uh, not, and again, not with expectation, just because it's there. You
Mhm.
realize just how valuable that is. And it was even something that I don't think I realized, because like I said, I don't. pay attention and someone's negative or I don't like something, I don't give it any never mind. I don't have time.
Mhm.
And I don't really feel like wasting the energy I have on that particular sort of nonsense. And I used to write for a magazine, and part of my thing was when I would write about like records and things like that, I wasn't going to sit and listen to something I didn't like. And I certainly wasn't going to write about it. It's just a waste of my time, and I would feel like anybody else's. But if I truly enjoy something, sure, I'm going to write about it. I'm going to tell people because my feeling is I really want people to be able to share that excitement, particularly if it's something that maybe isn't as well known. But even if it is, it's like to be able to put something positive out there, and help bring people together on a positive note. And whether it's music, whether it's laughter, whether it's just some whatever kind of piece of art it might be, whether it's a philosophical TV show or something of that nature. Just being able to foster discussions about something that emotions and depth of feeling and things that bring people together as a connection. That matters, and that to me really also speaks to the power of God, because creativity is the power of God.
It is.
Inspiration is that connection. It is that power. And I know from having written too, inspiration comes from somewhere outside of oneself. Paul McCartney had written Yesterday like that. It just came to
Wow.
him kind of in a dream. So it really is something that comes from outside oneself, and we're a channel for it. And I think sometimes too that once people kind of have that more expanded awareness, that we're not in it alone, and to be able to feel that and to have that knowledge with a certainty, it can really provide folks with a much better, more peaceful, confident life that brings more caring, and not and you get rid of that attitude of it always has to be me versus everybody else. It's just a nonsense,
Right.
and it's something that it's unfortunate that we see this kind of attitude be fostered, but the thing is to be able to get the truth out there that that's not what life is. That's not what life's about. It's being able, how do we all come together and find our commonalities and connection, and grow those relationships in a healthy, positive way. That's really what God meant, by having 12 apostles, and with Jesus and everything. That's what it is supposed to be about. How do we all work together for everybody's upliftment? And
Yeah.
once, yeah, and I think once people kind of start understanding that we're each a piece of God, we all have something positive to contribute, and we all have ways that we can help somebody else, even if we don't maybe understand it prior to having some of these experiences or this radical self-examination. It is something that I promise that people will come to after they've kind of started doing the work.
Hmm. And this kind of a spiritual experience also for people in the addiction issues where you're having issues with that, the freedom that we felt, that I felt was just beyond description. You suddenly, when this happens to you, you'll have empathy for everybody. There's nothing that you're not going to have empathy for somebody going through a certain situation. You'll find that you're able to communicate with the people better, especially people that are going through trauma or people that are going through pain, because you know where they're stuck behind, and you know that, there's a toxic emotion, you're in this cycle, and there is a way to break through that, but they sure can help use some help getting out of it. So we don't want to send everybody off and say, go be an island and suffer and you're going to have this great experience. That's
No.
not it. There's a way to do this in a community kind of format, but I think
Right.
what we really need, what the churches really need to understand what we're talking about, are these baptisms of the Holy Spirit back, which are very intense.
Yeah.
They're undeniable, especially for the experiencer. Some of the people watching might see some miracle type things happen. They're not something to be trifled with. And I think as we get into future episodes, we're going to talk about how some of this stuff actually was done. Some of this research was done by people like Viktor Frankl. He maybe didn't take it all the way to as far as we're talking about, but he wasn't suffering like we were,
Right.
or he did it in different ways. So if we get all these voices together, maybe we can find out what is it about what's common about this emptying out process that sparks these intense spiritual experiences. Because this is not like an AA thing or an NA thing where you give up your power,
No,
and this is the opposite. You're going to come out of this very empowered,
right.
very powerful, unencumbered
Yes.
by the past and a whole lot of other things like that. So the more we understand, the more we say this is a reality of our lives. This isn't a reality that people have the right to experience without calling those people manic, schizophrenic, bipolar, or what
Yeah.
any of the other
Right.
pejoratives that the psych industry will throw at us when we start communicating in that vein. So
Yeah.
that's where we are. And
Yeah.
remember what we're saying, we
All
learned
those
them because we
slurs.
had to, but we practice them now because we want to. That's where we're at, if
Yep.
that helps.
Yeah. And you can think of Joan of Arc also, and how she would have been hit with numerous psychiatric slurs had she been in
Oh, yeah,
modern day, as opposed to being seen for the saint and the visionary that she was.
absolutely.
So,
So let's stop the
yeah,
stigma and start living. That sounds good. Maybe
absolutely.
that's
A,
our theme for
a
this week
better life
anyway.
than anybody could have imagined. It's far better than you can conceive of until you have been through it. That's the
Absolutely.
truth.
I
Yeah,
completely agree. And with that,
yeah.
we've about hit our hour. Thank you so much, Dana. I
Wow.
really appreciate the time we spend together. Time goes
I do
fast through this,
too.
and um, I'll
I
get some stuff
know.
together, and we'll see you next week. And thanks for the people that are supporting us. We really appreciate it because this is a difficult topic, and we've paid a huge price to be able to just sit here and do this. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
See you next
Thanks.
week.
God bless.
Same
See
to
you
you.
then.
See you next week.
See you on.